Okay, 13.3 is called finding ratios of 6 trig functions. If you take trigonometry next year, you really center on the 17 popular angles. And these are the 17 popular angles that you really study in trigonometry. And like I said, this is just a little taste of what trig will look like for next year. So, next page. So, I'm going to put little thetas here because I couldn't make a little theta, so just give me 2 seconds. Instead of floating triangles in trigonometry, you make your angle and then you always bring it to the x-axis, or you make your angle and you bring it to the x-axis in the second quadrant, or the third and bring it to the x-axis, or the fourth and bring it to the x-axis. So these are right triangles. You guys know it as so, ka, toa. But that kind of goes out the door when you take trigonometry. This is the angle. It's always the one closest to the origin. This is the side opposite, and the side opposite is no longer opposite. It's called the y. This is the side adjacent, and this is on a circle. That's why it's called a unit circle. And instead of the hypotenuse being an hypotenuse, it's an r. So instead of O over H, the O really stands for the letter Y in trigonometry. The adjacent side stands for the letter X, and the hypotenuse stands for the letter R. So you guys know it as O over H, but in trigonometry, the O is the Y, and the H is the R. See that over here? The O is the Y and the H is the R. So we memorize it as Y over R, and the reciprocal is R over Y. Excuse me, the cosine is X over R or R over X, and the tangent is Y over X and X over Y. You can keep it this way, but if you take trig next year, I will refer to it in this form instead. So if I were you, I would write this little key down that the O really stands for the Y, the A stands for the X, and the H stands for the R. Okay, next part. How to draw your angle. So for 150 degrees, we have to find the reference angle. How do you find the reference angle? The reference angle is always positive, and it's always an acute angle, which means less than 90 degrees. So, for example, if I asked you to find 150 degrees, I draw the 150 degrees to that quadrant. Once I make my triangle down to the x-axis. This is called the reference angle, the angle near the origin. And since I want 150 degrees, and I know that this is a straight line, I know that this angle in here is 30 degrees, and that's called the reference angle. It's the angle that makes that triangle, that right triangle. Let's do another one. So the first part of the assignment, you have to recognize what a reference angle is. I graph 225, which is in this quadrant. Make your triangle. Always goes to the x-axis and never goes to the y-axis. I went past the 180 marker by 45 degrees, so that is the reference angle. It's always positive, and it's always less than 90 degrees. This one, a negative pi over 6 is the same thing as, remember how to go from radians to degrees on the last section, cross out the pi's, 3 goes into a negative 180, a negative 60. You go down a negative 60, which would put you in the fourth quadrant, bring that up to the x-axis. This degree in here is always positive, and this is 60 degrees. And that's how you find the reference angle. Let's do one more. I'm gonna do like 120 degrees. I graph where 120 degrees is. It's about right there. You always make a right triangle to the x-axis. If this is 120 degrees, this part right here needs to make a straight line, 180. So this angle in there is the reference angle. which is 60 degrees. So that's the first part of the assignment, is coming up with the reference angle. Okay, the second part of the assignment is to find the exact value. So the next page basically is all the same picture. It's the exact same picture, but in different quadrants. So all I'm gonna do is, basically when you talk about trig, there's two types of triangles, and you would have learned these in geometry. A 30, a 60, and a 90 triangle, and the side opposite of 30 is 1, the side opposite of 60 is √3, and the hypotenuse on a 30, 60, 90 triangle is 2. And the other triangle that you have to know is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which is an isosceles. Opposite of 45 is 1, opposite of 45 is 1, and the hypotenuse is 2. So basically, if you look at this diagram, it just shows you the 30 degrees, opposite of 30 is 1, opposite of 60, which is this one, is √3, and the hypotenuse on a 30, 60, 90 is 2. And it just shows you in different quadrants. And same thing with the 60. The 30, 60 and the 60, 30 are exactly the same picture. And then the 45, 45. And the reason why there's 4 different pictures is because this, you go out on the x-axis a positive one here, but you go out on the x-axis a negative one here. See the difference? The more we do these, the better you get at these two. So let's just do part 1. Part 1 says to sketch the angle and find the reference angle. So I'm gonna sketch 110, which puts you about right there. Remember, you make your triangles to the x-axis. This angle in here is called the reference angle. It's always positive, and it's always less than 90 degrees. And it would be 70 degrees. Let's do one more. Let's find the reference angle for 250. I start here at 0, and I go to 90, then I go to 180, and I know that this is 270, so it's going to be short of 270 by this much. It's so easy to bring this to the y-axis, but you always bring it to the x-axis. I went past the 180 marker by also 70 degrees. Okay, the next part of the assignment. Practice for part 2, finding the trig functions. These are the steps. Draw the angle. Make a triangle. Find the reference angle. Label the sides of your triangle. And write the formula down for what you're finding and find it and solve. So step number 1, draw the angle. So the first thing we're going to do is draw 225. It's about 225. So I drew the angle, make the triangle, and it always goes up to the x-axis. So I made the triangle. Figure out the reference angle, which is this angle right here. I went past the 220 or the 180 marker by 45 degrees. Label the sides. This is a 90, 45, 45 triangle. Since you're in this third quadrant, I have to go out on the x-axis a -1. I have to go down on the y-axis a -1. The hypotenuse is always positive, so it's √2. That's always positive. So I labeled the sides. And now I'm going to figure out the formula, and I know that sine is the same thing as y over r, or opposite over hypotenuse. Here's the reference angle. The side opposite is a -1, and I know the hypotenuse is √2. Multiply the top and the bottom by √2, -√2 over 2. Final answer. I'll just take a quick little breather. I'm gonna get something to drink quick. Okay, let's do the next one. We want to find the tangent of 150 degrees. So let's go through these 5 steps. The first thing you're going to do is graph the angle. Where's 150 degrees? Approximately right there. Make yourself a right triangle. Always 100% going to the x-axis. There's the 90 degrees. I went 150, and I know all the way around is 180. So that's 30. That's 90, and this is 60. I'm going to go out onto the x-axis on negative root 3 because the opposite of 60 is the root 3. I'm going to go up on the y-axis 1, and I know the hypotenuse on a 30, 60, 90 triangle is 2. The x is negative in this direction and positive in this direction. The y is positive up. So the x is positive in this direction, negative in this direction. The y is positive in this direction and negative in this direction. Remember, the hypotenuse is never negative. Okay, now I have to figure out what the tangent is. It used to be TOA. It used to be opposite over adjacent. So this is the reference angle. Opposite, if you don't want to use my formula, opposite of 30 is 1, and the adjacent is a negative root 3. Multiply the top and the bottom by root 3, and you're going to get a negative root 3 over 3. Any more? Oh yeah, we have a whole bunch more. Whole bunch more. Let's do a couple more. Let's do the cosecant of a negative 240. You're going in this direction, a negative 240, and it's about right here is a negative 240. Come down to the x-axis. You went past the 180 marker by 60. Opposite of 60 is root 3. Opposite of 30 is a negative 1. Hypotenuse is 2. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. The adjacent side is a negative 1. The hypotenuse side is 2. We're going to spend 3 days on this. So if you're not catching on to this right now, it's okay. Because the more and more and more you draw these pictures, the better you get at. Cosecant of 300 all the way around here. You bring that up to the x-axis. I went 300, so this has to be 60 to make a perfect 360. This is a negative root 3 opposite of 60. This is 30, which is 1, and a hypotenuse has a 2. This is the reciprocal of sine. Sine is opposite over adjacent, opposite over hypotenuse, so it's hypotenuse over opposite. Hypotenuse is 2. And the opposite is a negative root 3. Can't leave a radical in the denominator, so multiply the top and the bottom by root 3. Don't forget the negative sign. Couple more. Cotangent of a negative 300. And then I'll worry about this one. I think I'll talk about that part. I'll talk about that one tomorrow, so don't worry about this. We're just going to do this for part 1. Let's just do one more. Negative 300 puts you in this quadrant. This is 60. This is root 3. This is a positive 1, and the hypotenuse is 2. Cotangent is adjacent over opposite. Well, this is the reference angle, and this is the adjacent side, and this is the opposite side. Multiply the top and the bottom. And that's all the notes so far for part 1 for 13.3.